Hey guys, and welcome back finally to the next episode of the Inventory Remake Squared series, the 2024 inventory series. In the past episode, I believe we worked on the inventory client. We added this update display function to where whenever we run the game, if we go to the inventory, it'll actually show the items in the inventory. And if we add more items, like duplicating the rock, then it'll adjust the inventory accordingly and update every time an item is changed in the player's backpack. The next thing we're going to work on is making so you can, in the inventory, select the items and it'll display the item info thing we created over here. And so that way we can actually select the items and then equip them to the hotbar and other things like that. So in order to get started with that, we're going to go to the inventory client script, and just for a reminder, it's in starter player scripts, client, inventory client. And what we're going to do is, so if you look at the update display function, we're looping through every item in the inventory. So that's going to be in the GUI right here, the item scroll, and we have this sample, right? So you're going to have a bunch of clones of this sample for each item. And we're going to loop through those and we're going to destroy them all except for the sample. We want to leave the sample there. And then we're going to create new ones based on the items currently in the inventory. And so it's effectively going to refresh the inventory display to match whatever is actually in the inventory. And so in this loop, we can use this item F, since these samples are all text buttons, we can use this item F variable to connect to the mouse button 1 clicked event in order to actually detect when each of these item slots is actually pressed. So we're going to do item F.mouse button 1 click connect function, and then in here we can do print item F was pressed. So now if we open the inventory, we can see it will actually print whenever we press each of these stacks, and it'll print what stack was pressed. And that'll remain the same even as the inventory refreshes. And this will reconnect every time it refreshes the inventory, and so it'll create new connections for this, but we don't need to worry about disconnecting old connections, because whenever an item is destroyed, whenever an instance is destroyed, then it disconnects all the connections related to it, all the event connections automatically. And so just how this is already, this will already work as it is. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to define a function to actually define the logic for selecting items. So we're going to take one parameter here, the stack data, that we want to select. Before we can do too much with actually selecting items, we're going to need some place to store which item is currently selected. And so we're going to do that up here. I'm going to go down right here, inventory client.selected stack ID. I'm going to set that to no. And so this is a variable we're going to set to be a number of whichever stack ID for the stack that's currently equipped, or currently selected, not equipped. So we're going to set that variable, or that value, setting selected item, inventory client dot selected stack ID, the thing we just created, equals if stack data, then stack data dot stack ID, else nil. I'm going to change this and specify if stack data is not equal to nil. And so this is essentially just a shorthand notation. What this means is we're saying, okay, so we take this, we're looking at this value, this is what we want to change, and as for what we actually want to set it to, it depends, okay, if stack data is not nil, then we'll set it to this. If stack data is nil, then we'll set it to nil. This is the same thing as doing if stack data is not equal to nil, then inventory client dot selected stack ID equals stack data dot stack ID. This whole thing right here is essentially equivalent to what this is doing. So this is just a shorthand notation for all of that. So now that we've set this specific stack as the stack that's like selected, we also want to have some kind of visual display that indicates that the stack is selected. Because right now, I mean, we don't really have anything that'll let us know which stack is currently selected. So we might want to like change the color of that stack. So we're going to find the item frame for that stack. And so here we're using the same thing pretty much. We're saying, okay, if the stack data isn't nil, and the idea behind checking if it isn't nil is just to say, okay, well, if it is nil and we provide nil as the item to select, then that'll just deselect the stack. And so that allows this function to both serve for selecting a stack as well as for deselecting a stack. So that's why we have these checks for nil. Anyway, so if stack data isn't nil, then we're going to use the findFirstChild function to find whichever item has this specific name. And this is the name we set right here. Otherwise, we set item f to nil. And item f is going to be a text button, but we're going to add a question mark because it might be nil, right? But it's going to be text button because all the item frames are going to be cloned from this sample, which is a text button. Okay, so what we're doing here, before I fully finish this, we're looping through all of the items in the item scrolling frame. So there's going to be a bunch of these clones of the sample, right? And for each one, we're checking, okay, is that item a text button? And then is that item not the sample item? And so this is essentially the same code we have right here, but we're going to put something different in here. And essentially what we're going to do is we're going to say if other item f is equal to item f. So if this item we're currently looping through is the item that is selected, then we want to do other item f dot background color, and we want to change the background color 3 to a different color. Now, one thing we really need to do first is we actually need to define what the colors we want each frame to change to whenever they're selected or deselected. So we're going to go over here to the starter GUI. We're going to go into the inventory, item scroll, sample, and we're going to go down all the way down to the attributes. We're going to add a new attribute, and we're going to call it selected color. And we could also just create a variable in the script for this, but I like to do it this way just so that way I can look at the UI itself and know, and I can configure the design of like what color each UI object is going to be from the UI objects themselves. So I'm going to set the selected color to be this yellowish tannish color right here. And then I'm going to create a new attribute. We're going to do normal color. We're going to set this one also to a color 3 object. And then this one's going to be just 150, 150, 150. So that'll be gray essentially, which should match, yeah, that matches the current background color 3. And you want to make sure those two match. So other item dot background color 3, we want to set it to item, or let's see, we want to set it to other item f get attribute selected color. And so that's how we can access this color that we defined. Then we can do else. So if the item we're currently looping through is not the selected item, then we want to put it as the normal color in case it was previously the selected item. We want to, we want to set it back to the normal color. Other item f background color 3 equals other item f get attribute normal color. So this alone should have the basic functionality. We're going to need to add more here. So let's just test what we have so far. Let's add the function call here. So whenever an item is selected or whenever it's clicked, then I'm just going to put what the AI has because I'm pretty sure that's right. We want to run inventory client select item and provide the stack data. So now if we run this, open inventory, now we can click on something and it'll change color, and we notice only one thing can be the selected color at the same time. So you can't have it, like it gets rid of it resets the color of this object. So like this object is currently selected, but if I select another one, it's going to reset that back to the normal color because of the for loop we defined here. Just this loop through all the item frames. And so now the next thing we want to do, we want to use this item info frame right here, and we want to actually display this whenever an item is selected. And so what we're going to do, I'm going to make this invisible again. updating information. If stack data is not equal to nil, then setting stack information. We're going to do info f, that's the info frame, dot visible equals true. Item name key dot text equals stack data dot name. So the info f, we have that defined up here. We have all the GUI variables defined up there, right, from the earlier episodes. We're going to set that to be visible so we can see it. We're going to set it to have the text set to the stack data, the name of the stack, right? We're going to have the item description text equals stack data dot description. We're going to add some more stuff here later as well, but for now, that's everything we need. So we're going to do an else, and then in this bottom portion, when stack data is null, when we're trying to unequip or unselect the current item, then we want to set info f dot visible equals false, and yeah. So now if we run that, now you can see it opens this information and it'll actually change the title and the description to match the specific item. Another thing is we can't currently deselect any items. So if you want to be able to deselect an item, then we're going to have to make a couple changes here. So my idea is maybe when an item is already selected, if you click it again, it'll deselect it, right? So in order to do that, we can do if inventory client dot selected stack ID is equal to stack data dot stack ID, and then we're going to define an else. So if it's not equal, so if the stack we just clicked on is not currently equipped, we're going to equip it. And if it is currently, or not equipped, if it is currently selected, we're going to deselect it. Which we can also just do that, and that'll be the same. And so yeah, that should allow us to deselect items as well. We select it, and we deselect it, and you notice it makes the information frame go away. And now one other thing that we might want to do is, you notice the equip button right here and the drop button. The equip button, right now all it does is it says equip, but we also want to use that same button for unequipping. And so if an item is already equipped, we're going to want to unequip it as well. But I might get to that later. But that's going to be using this same select item function. So we're going to make use of this and call another function from within this. I think the next most obvious thing to move on to now is going to be the hotbar display. So in order to get started with updating the hotbar, we're going to use the same update display function, and we're just going to add some extra stuff at the bottom. So after we fully updated the inventory, we're going to add essentially another loop, updating hotbar for slot number equals 1, 10 do. So if you're not familiar with this kind of for loop, basically we're setting a variable slot number, we're going to set it equal to 1, and then every time this for loop iterates, every time it runs the code in here, it's going to increase the slot number by 1. So the first time it'll be 1, then it'll be 2, 3, 4, all the way up until 10. And you can change what it increases or decreases by specifying a third value. So this is equivalent to this, because by default it'll increase by 1. So we're going to loop through the numbers 1 to 10. And then we're going to, and then for this specific hotbar slot that we're currently looping through, and if you don't have 10 hotbar slots, then you want to loop through how many hotbar slots you have, right? But for this current hotbar slot we're looping through, we want to then find the hotbar frame. So that's going to be hotbar and then each of these frames, right? So we're going to find the hotbar frame, and then we're also going to want to find the stack ID for the item currently equipped there if there is one. So what we're going to do, we're going to define a new variable up here at the top. We're going to call it local hotbar slots. We're going to set it to an empty table. And so this is going to be a really simple table. We're just going to have hotbar f dot slot 1, and just do this for all of the hotbar slots in order. Make sure it's in the order that you want them to appear in, right? So 1 to 3, and then all the way up to 0. And this is equivalent to if we added number keys here. And so if I did this for each of the values and set it like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 9, 10, that would be equivalent to just doing this. And so what we're essentially doing here is we're defining a way of mapping a specific hotbar slot number to the slot frame itself. And so that's what we're going to be using this table for. It's just kind of a helper table. So that's what we're going to use here. So we're going to do getting slot data, or getting slot information. We're going to say local slot F is going to be text button, and we're going to set that equal to hotbar slots, slot numbers. And so notice what we're essentially doing here, right? We're taking this hotbar slots table, and it's just all of these listed out in order, right? From 1 to 9 and then slot 0 at the very end, right? And since we have this hotbar slots table and it's listed out in that order, the indices of that table are going to be the numbers 1 through 10, because the indices will start at 1. And so we can use slot number to find the specific slot frame based on that number using this table. So we can do local stack ID, which is going to be a number, equals inventory client, inventory data, and then hotbar slot slot num. I think we can double check in the types module. Yes. So the hotbar type, it has slot 1, slot 2, slot 3. So we're essentially taking the word slot and then adding the number afterwards to get our key. And so in order to find what stack ID is currently equipped in that hotbar slot, we just say slot and then ... then the slot number. And this can also be nil, so I'm going to specify that right there if there's nothing equipped in the hotbar slot. So now we're going to update the display of that slot based on the information we now have. So if stack data, or if stack ID equals nil, then in that case, we don't currently have an item selected there, or an item equipped to that slot, and so all we need to do is slot f.count.visible equals false. So we're going to turn off the count text, so that's going to be, if we look at the UI, that's going to be this one X right here. So we want to make sure that's not visible if there's not an item in there. Slot f.image is equal to an empty string. So that way, if there was an image there already from before, then we want to get rid of that image and make sure this is an empty slot. And then we're going to do else. And so now if there is an item equipped to that current slot, then we want to find the stack data for that item and then update the display of the hotbar slot accordingly. So we're going to do finding stack data, local found stack, and this is going to be types.stackData equals inventory client.find. So this is a function we're going to need to create. This is going to be just a really simple helper function. I'm going to add it at the very bottom just because we're not really going to need to access it a lot. So finding stack data from ID. Function inventory client.find stack data from ID. It's going to take in the stack ID, which is going to be a number, and it's going to output types.stackData. And we're going to add a question mark there because it might be nil, right? Like in the case that there's not a stack with that stack ID. For I, stack data, this is going to be types.stackData in pairs, inventory client, inventory data, inventory 2. And we also don't need this pairs here. It works fine to have the pairs there, but you don't technically need that. It works mostly the same. If stack data dot stack ID equals stack ID, then return stack data. And so what we're essentially doing, we're looping through all the stacks in the inventory, and we're seeing, okay, well, is there a stack that has the specific stack ID we're looking for? And if there is, we return it. If not, it'll by default return nil. We don't need that. We can add this line in here, but it will still return nil if we don't return anything. And so by default, if there's not a stack found, it'll return nil automatically. Which is why I wanted this question mark here. So now we can use this function, inventory client.find stack data from ID, and we can specify the stack ID because we already have that. And so now, if there's a stack data for that stack ID, we have the information for that now. And so we're going to say if, we're going to do updating information, if found stack, then we're going to do slot f.count.text. So we're going to set the count. Actually, I believe these I'm referencing these wrong. So slot item count, yes. So this isn't supposed to be count, this is supposed to be item count. I believe I made that mistake last episode too. And then the image should be, oh yeah, so this should be image.image as well. Alright, so then slot f, so if we have a found stack, so if found stack is not equal to nil, right, to be more specific, then we're going to set the text for the item count equal to found stack dot items. We're going to do the number of found stack dot items dot x. Then we're going to do slot f dot image equals found stack dot image. And then we're going to do if number of found stack dot items is equal to 1, then slot f dot count dot visible equals false, else slot f dot count dot visible equals true. And this is basically the same thing as what we did with the inventory items, the inventory frames. If the amount of items in the stack is only 1, then we don't really need to display 1 times, because we already know it's just 1 item, right? So we only want that to be visible if there's at least 2 items in that stack. And so we're doing the same thing here. If it's equal to 1, then we set it to not be visible, and if it's not equal to 1, then that means it's greater than 1, because it's not going to be equal to 0, because that's what, well yeah, it's not going to be equal to 0, because that would indicate a problem in the inventory server module creating an empty stack. So if you did have the number of stack data items equal to 0, that would be a problem in this module. But we shouldn't ever get that, because if it gets to 0, it should get rid of the stack. And so now, so this is all updating the information for the stack, or for the hotbar slot, to match the information from the stack that's equipped to it, right? If there's not a stack found, so it looks like, you know, there's a stack ID set for that hotbar. It looks like there's something equipped there, but then we try to find a stack with that stack ID, and we get nothing. So if that's the case, put an else here, then we want to display it as if it's empty. And so we can just copy this, and it'll be the same. We could also alternatively right here send a signal to unequip the item from the slot. However, it's probably best not to, just because if, for example, you know, this portion likely isn't going to run very often, only in like a case where like there's some sort of bug going on or something. And so, for example, if the client, the inventory data, has the hotbar set to have a stack data or a stack ID equipped to a specific slot, then we check this and we find that there's not a stack with that stack ID. That's going to be an unlikely issue that we probably won't run into. And if we do, rather than trying to like mess with inventory or like change something, we're just going to display it as empty, because it may as well be, right? And now one thing, so we're going to test this first, but there is going to be an issue that will come up. So we're going to run this, hit play. Okay, we have an error. That's another one of those same mistakes I made earlier. That's on line Control G. If you press Control G, you can go straight to a line. You see that it's line 197. Line 197. So this is supposed to be item count dot visible. So that's not bad. Okay, and now you can see, since it automatically equips items to the hotbar as we set it up in here, right? Whenever you have a register item, let's see. It creates a new stack, so no stack is found, creates a new stack, and then it automatically equips items to the first empty slot if there is one. And so that's why these are already equipped. But one issue, this one you'll notice this one's not equipped to the hotbar, and that's because it's an armor item, and our armor items are set up to not be able to get equipped to the hotbar. They're going to automatically equip to the armor instead, which we haven't set up yet, which is why I have this whole thing here. But the issue we're going to run into, so if we go to the client, or if we go not to the client, if we go to the server side, we go to the backpack and we add new items, right? So we have a bunch of rocks now. It'll update and everything, right? And it updates on the hotbar too, you'll notice. So I forgot to actually select an item. If you select an item and then you do that, notice it actually deselects the item, but then also doesn't remove this display here. And so there's an issue where whenever the display is updated, whenever the update display function runs, it gets rid of the selected color. So when the color when an item is selected, and it also the item was still selected because you notice if I press it again, it deselected it, even though it didn't have the selected color. And so it's kind of an issue, right? So we're going to do a little thing to fix that. At the very end of the update display function, we're going to add a new section, reselecting item. We're going to say local equipped data, and this is going to be looking at the, I'm going to rename that, local selected stack, and we're going to set this as the types.stack data equals inventory client find stack data from ID. We're using that same function as before. Inventory client selected stack ID, and that's the variable we have right here somewhere. I missed it. That's the variable we have right here. So we're looking at the currently selected item in the inventory. We're going to see if we can find the stack ID for that item. I'm also going to add a question mark there because that might be no. And then we're going to do inventory client.select item selected stack. And I'm glad I did this portion, the if statement here. I'm glad I was originally thinking about doing this inside this function instead, the if statement, but I'm glad I did it separately because that would actually make this next part harder. So essentially what's going on here, I can actually move this up just to make it look nicer, but essentially what we're doing, so after it finishes updating the display, we're going to see, okay, we find the stack that was previously selected, and then we just rerun the select item function to reselect that stack. And the reason why I'm glad I put this if statement here instead of in the actual function is because if it was in the actual function, then running this function when the stack is already selected, that would simply deselect the stack, which isn't what we want. But now, instead, so we go to the inventory, we select an item, and then we go over to test, go to server mode, and then we update the inventory, we add different items and things. You notice it stays selected, right? And I can still select other things as well. And so that fixes that issue. So now the next thing we're going to do is we're going to set up, because right now if we click these, notice these are all already equipped, and you notice it actually displays them as being equipped as well because of what we did in the update display function. But even though they're already equipped, it shows the equip button. But we want to, whenever you have a selected item as an equipped item, we want this to show unequip instead of equip. We only want it to show equip when the item that's currently selected isn't already equipped, right? And so we're going to add a function to where whenever you select an item, we want to update this button to display the correct thing based on whether or not that item is already equipped to the hotbar, or if it's an armor item, to the armor slots. We're going to do it right under this onDrop button function. We're going to do setting equip button, setting equip UnEquip Button. So function inventory client set equip button, and we're going to have one parameter to set, which is going to be either true or false. So then if toSet equals either true, then else, and yada yada. It looks like the AI kind of broke this. I'm not sure. I'm going to close this and reopen it. I think this isn't the first time that's happened to me. Okay, there we go. Cool. So now we have this if statement. So if we want to set the equip button, so essentially what this function is going to do, we're going to say, okay, if you run this function with true, it's going to set the button to show equip. If you run it with false, it's going to set the button to show unequip. That's basically all we're doing here. It's pretty simple. So then all we're going to do, equip b, the equip button, .text equals equip. And then down here, equip b, .text equals unequip. And that'll work, but we also want to change the color of the equip buttons, or the equip button, to match, because if the button says unequip, we want it to be maybe red instead of green. And so we're actually going to add attributes here, just like we added attributes to the hotbar slots, right? Not the hotbar slots. We're going to add attributes to the hotbar slots later as well, but it was the item sample frame. So we're going to add attributes similar to these two, but we're going to add it to the equip button. So go to the equip button, attributes, we're going to create a new attribute. We're going to do color 3, and we're going to say equip color, and then we're going to do another one, and it's going to be unequip color. And so the equip color, that's the color it's already at, it's just going to be green. The unequip color, I'll set it as red. Then you can change these colors as you want. So then in the set equip button, we're also going to do equip B, equip button dot background color 3 equals equip B, get attribute, equip color. And then down here, unequip color. Okay, so now we have this function that we can use to set the button to either be equip or unequip, but we're not actually running it anywhere, so it's not going to do anything, right? So the first place we want to run it, and the only places we want to run it, is in this select item function. So whenever you select an item, we want to update whether or not it's going to show equip or unequip. And so essentially we can just use this if statement we have already. So if the stack data for the item that was just selected is not nil, then we set the information to that stack data, right? Then we're also going to do setting equip button. So then local is equipped, and this is going to be a new function we're going to have to define. Inventory client dot check item equipped stack data. I'm going to define that in a second. I'm going to write out these lines first. Inventory client dot set equip button not is equipped. And so this is going to be a function we're going to use to look at a specific stack data and check if that item is currently equipped to either the hotbar or the armor. And it'll return either true or false. And so what we're saying, okay, so if it's true, we want to set the equip button to be unequipped, and if it's false, we want to set it to be equipped. So we're adding this not here to invert it. I'm also going to copy this function. I'm going to put it in this else portion, except I'm just going to put it as true. Because if stack data is nil, in other words, the item we currently selected is, well, we essentially deselected the item, then we know that the currently selected item is in fact, or rather, okay, so if stack data is nil, then we set equip button to true, just because that way we can have the equip button be equipped by default. And so if you don't have an item selected, it's going to show true, it's going to show equip. So if you wanted, you could also maybe have like a third option where it like grays out the button and then like do that here. Because there's no item selected, right? But it's not going to really matter because the whole frame is going to be invisible anyway. So I guess you could honestly just get rid of this now that I think about it. I don't think it really matters. But I'm going to leave it here just so that way the default for the equip button is going to be equip. And so now we're going to set up this function. So we need to create a function that allows us to check if an item is currently equipped based on the stack data. So let's define this new function. So we're going to put this, let's see, I'm going to put it right above here. So we're going to call this, so checking if an item is currently equipped, function inventory client dot check item equipped stack data, and this is going to be of types stack data. It's going to be of type types stack data, and this is going to return either true or false. And so what we're going to do, okay, so if stack data dot item type is equal to armor. So if it's an armor item, we want to define this differently than if it's a hotbar or if it's a regular item, right? So if it's not an armor item, then I'm going to define this part first. So I'm going to say for slot key, which is going to be a string, and stack ID, which is going to be a number, and inventory client dot in data dot hotbar do. So we're going to loop through the hotbar table in the inventory data, and we're going to say if the we're going to say if stack ID is equal to, well, basically what this is saying, right? If stack ID is equal to stack data.stack ID, then we're going to return true and say that yes, the item is currently equipped because we just looped through every item and we found one that has the same stack ID, right? Or one item in the hotbar that has the same stack ID, so we know it's equipped to the hotbar. So we're going to return true. And if we go through this entire loop and it doesn't find anything, then we return false. In this armor portion, we're going to do basically the same thing, but looping through the armor table instead. So I'm just going to copy this, and I'm going to change this armor type and stack ID, and we're going to change this to the armor table. And everything else is going to be the same. So now we're looping through all the armors, all the armor types. If you look up here, expert type armor, we have head, chest, feet, so we're looping through those three, and we're saying, okay, is the item currently equipped to that slot? Is it the item that we're looking at? If it is, return true. If not, return false. And that's going to be the entire function. So we're going to go down here, and remember we have this right here. And so we're essentially, okay, local is equipped is going to tell us whether or not this current stack is currently equipped to either the hotbar or the armor slots. So now if we run this, we can see it shows not the right thing. Okay, so it appears that for regular items it does work correctly. For armor items it doesn't work correctly because but it does show, like if you look at these are all equipped already, and it shows the unequip button instead. But for this one it shows the equip button. So that might be an issue, and that one's the armor item, so that one's different. So it's likely running this, the other portion. So let's see. It's running this portion. So there's something wrong about this, I believe. I'm going to do some testing. Okay, I believe I found the issue. And the issue is a simple line that I forgot to add. And so the reason why, if I run this, the reason why when I select the armor, it shows it's equipped, right? But it shows the equip button, even though it shows that it's equipped. The reason for that is because it's actually not equipped. The issue is that we simply didn't actually set the equipped text right here to be not visible if it's not equipped. So it's a one line of code that we can add. So I'm going to do, in the update display function, whenever we're updating the inventory, I'm going to say itemF.equipped. That's going to be this text label. That's the thing that shows whether or not it's equipped. I'm going to say .visible. And the reason I didn't add this earlier is because we didn't have the function defined for how to check this. But now we can just do inventory client.check item equipped. And we're going to do stack data. And that should be all we need. And so this is going to return either true or false, which is exactly what this needs, right? If it's equipped, we want this to be visible. Otherwise, we want it to not be visible. So that should make, so if you look at this, now the armor shows that it's not equipped, and it shows the equip button here, right? All right, this is going to be the end of this episode. We didn't quite finish the inventory client side. There's still a bit of work that needs to be done. For example, we can't unequip and equip items to and from the hotbar. We can't select items in the hotbar, right? There's a few different things we need to do. But those are going to be a bit complicated, and since this video is getting pretty long, then I figure I'll end it here, and we'll get into that in the next episode. Nonetheless, though, I hope you enjoyed, and as always, remember that if you want to be able to access the files for this tutorial and for other tutorials directly, you can always purchase the $299 a month membership on either YouTube or Patreon. And if you're interested in one-on-one tutoring sessions with me, then you can purchase any of the 3 higher tier memberships as well for varying hours per month of tutoring. Either way though, I hope you enjoyed, and I will see you next time.